Billionaire finds Waitress sleeping in the storage room. Her explanation made him rewrite his entire company policy. What if the most successful businessman in the city discovered that his empire was built on the backs of people who couldn't even afford a decent night's sleep? At 3 in the morning, when most of the world was wrapped in warm blankets, 42-year-old tech mogul Richard Sterling made a discovery that would shake him to his core. He'd returned to his flagship restaurant to retrieve some forgotten documents when he heard the softest sound coming from the storage room, the gentle breathing of someone fast asleep among boxes of dinner rolls and industrial-sized cans of tomato sauce. What he found there wasn't a break-in or a homeless stranger seeking shelter. It was Sophia, one of his most dedicated waitresses, curled up on a makeshift bed of flour sacks, her work uniform still perfectly pressed despite sleeping on the cold floor. Her explanation for being there would challenge everything Richard thought he knew about the people who worked for him and ultimately transform how he ran his entire business. Where are you watching from tonight? Richard Sterling had built his restaurant empire from nothing, starting with a single diner he'd inherited from his grandmother 20 years ago. Now, at 42, he owned 15 upscale establishments across the state, each one a testament to his relentless work ethic and business acumen. He prided himself on being a fair employer, offering competitive wages and benefits that exceeded industry standards. At least, that's what he believed until that fateful early morning encounter. Sophia Chen had been working at Sterling's flagship location for 8 months. At 34, she possessed a rare combination of grace under pressure and genuine warmth that made her a favorite among regular customers. She never missed a shift, never complained about difficult customers, and somehow managed to make even the most ordinary dinner feel special through her attentive service. Her colleagues respected her quiet strength, and managers often praised her reliability in their weekly reports. What Richard didn't know was that Sophia had been living a double life, one that would have horrified him had he understood the true cost of her dedication. Every morning, she arrived at the restaurant 2 hours before her shift to help with prep work, staying late to assist with closing duties. She volunteered for extra shift whenever possible, working 6 days a week without complaint. To everyone around her, including Richard during his occasional visits to the floor, she appeared to be the picture of a content, hard-working employee. The night of Richard's discovery had started routinely enough. He'd been at a business dinner with potential investors until nearly midnight, discussing plans for expansion into neighboring states. During the meal, he'd realized he'd left crucial financial projections in his office above the restaurant. Rather than wait until morning, he decided to retrieve them himself, using his master key to enter through the back entrance. The restaurant felt different in the silence, peaceful yet somehow mysterious, with shadows dancing across empty tables that had been filled with laughter and conversation just hours before. He'd climbed the stairs to his office, gathered his papers, and was heading back to his car when he heard it, a sound so soft he almost dismissed it as a building settling. But something made him pause, listening more carefully. There it was again, the rhythmic breathing of someone in deep sleep. His first thought was concern for security. Had someone broken in seeking shelter from the October cold? His second thought was worry for whoever might be desperate enough to sleep in a restaurant storage room. Following the sound, Richard approached the storage room door, which stood slightly ajar. He pushed it open gently, expecting to find a stranger who'd somehow gained entry. Instead, he discovered Sophia lying on her side among the supply boxes, her server's apron folded neatly beside her like a pillow. Her dark hair spread across a bag of flour she positioned beneath her head, and despite the uncomfortable surroundings, her face held the peaceful expression of someone finally able to rest. The sight stopped Richard cold. This wasn't just any employee seeking shelter. This was someone he'd personally commended just weeks earlier for her exceptional service during a particularly busy evening. Seeing her there, sleeping in his storage room, raised questions that made his chest tighten with an emotion he couldn't immediately name. Why would someone with a steady job need to sleep at work? What circumstances had led one of his best employees to this moment? Richard stood frozen in the doorway, unsure whether to wake Sophia or quietly retreat and pretend he'd never seen anything. The businessman in him worried about liability issues and company policies, while something deeper, a part of him he'd almost forgotten, felt genuinely concerned for her well-being. He chose compassion over protocol, gently clearing his throat to avoid startling her. Sophia's eyes fluttered open, and for a moment, confusion clouded her features. When she realized where she was and who was standing there, panic flooded her face. She sat up quickly, smoothing her hair and reaching for her apron with trembling fingers. "Mr. Sterling, I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice thick with sleep and embarrassment. "I know this looks terrible. I can explain everything. Please don't fire me." Richard held up a gentle hand, his tone softer than she'd ever heard it during his brief visits to the dining room. "Sophia, I'm not here to fire anyone. I'm here because I'm concerned. Why are you sleeping in my storage room at 3 in the morning?" The question hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. Sophia looked down at her hands, wrestling with whether to share the truth she'd been hiding for months. Finally, she took a shaky breath and began to speak. "My landlord raised the rent 3 months ago," she said, her words coming slowly as if each one cost her something precious. "I've been working every shift I can get, but it's still not enough to cover the new amount and still have money for food and my daughter's school supplies. I've been staying in my car most nights, but it got towed last week because I couldn't keep up with the payments." Richard felt something crack open in his chest. "You have a daughter." Sophia's face lit up despite her circumstances. "Katie. She's 7. She's staying with my sister across town during the week so she can stay in the same school district. I get to see her on Sundays." Her voice caught slightly. "I didn't want her to know things were this hard." The weight of her revelation settled over Richard like a heavy coat. This woman, who had served countless customers with unwavering professionalism, had been homeless for months. She'd been working in his restaurant day after day, making other people's evenings special while having no home to return to herself. "The storage room stays warm because of the industrial ovens next door," Sophia continued, as if she needed to justify her choice. "And I always make sure everything is clean and organized. I never take anything that doesn't belong to me. I just needed somewhere safe to sleep." Richard found himself thinking of his own daughter, safely tucked into a bed in their suburban mansion just 30 minutes away. He imagined the desperation Sophia must have felt, weighing the risk of losing her job against having nowhere else to go. The courage it must have taken to work each day with a smile, while carrying such a burden left him speechless. If this moment has touched your heart, please give the video a thumbs up. Standing there in the dim storage room, surrounded by the everyday supplies that kept his business running, Richard realized he was about to learn something about the hidden struggles of his employees that would change everything. But first, he needed to hear the rest of Sophia's story. "How long has this been going on?" Richard asked, settling himself on a nearby crate to show Sophia he wasn't in a hurry to leave. His expensive suit looked absurdly out of place among the industrial containers and bulk supplies, but his genuine concern created an unexpected intimacy in the sterile room. Sophia wrapped her arms around herself, as if trying to hold her dignity together. "About 6 weeks now. At first, I tried sleeping in the park, but it wasn't safe. Then my car, until—" She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence about losing her last refuge. "Sophia, why didn't you ask for help? We have an employee assistance program." A bitter smile crossed her face. "Mr. Sterling, that program offers a one-time emergency loan of $300. My rent went from $800 to $1,400 a month. The math just doesn't work." The stark reality hit Richard like a physical blow. He'd been proud of his employee assistance program, had even mentioned it in interviews as an example of his company's values. He'd never considered that a $300 emergency fund was meaningless against the realities his workers faced. "I've been doing everything right," Sophia continued, her voice gaining strength as she spoke her truth. "I show up early, I stay late, I cover other people's shifts. I smile at customers who treat me like I'm invisible, and I pretend everything is fine because that's my job. But Mr. Sterling, your competitive wages don't compete with the cost of living anymore. Not for people like me." Richard felt his entire worldview shifting. People like you. Single mothers. People without college degrees. People who work in restaurants because we need jobs that offer flexible hours around our kids' schedules, even though those same jobs don't pay enough to actually house those kids. Sophia's eyes filled with tears she'd been holding back for months. "I'm not asking for charity. I'm asking for a wage I can survive on." The silence that followed was heavy with years of assumptions Richard had never questioned. He thought of the board meetings where they'd celebrated keeping labor costs down, the quarterly reports that showed healthy profit margins, the bonuses he distributed to upper management while servers like Sophia struggled to find shelter. My grandmother started this business to help people, he said quietly, more to himself than to Sophia. She used to say that good food brought communities together, that restaurants were where people came to feel cared for. Your restaurants do that for the customers, Sophia replied gently, just not always for the people serving them. Richard looked around the storage room with new eyes, seeing it not as a supply closet but as a bedroom of someone who had nowhere else to go. The carefully stacked boxes that Sophia had arranged to avoid disturbing inventory, the small corner where she created a sleeping space without taking up unnecessary room, it all spoke to someone who was deeply respectful even in desperate circumstances. I've been thinking about this all wrong, he admitted. I've been running a business instead of taking care of people. Have you ever faced something like this? Let us know in the comments. As Richard sat there, surrounded by the stark evidence of his employees' hidden struggle, he realized that everything he thought he knew about success was about to change. The question was, what was he willing to do about it? Sophia, I want you to know that what happens next isn't charity, Richard said, his voice carrying conviction that surprised them both. It's overdue justice. But first, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Sophia nodded, wiping away tears she hadn't realized were falling. Are there other employees struggling like this? The question hung in the air like smoke. Sophia looked away, clearly wrestling with loyalty to her co-workers against the opportunity to finally speak truth to power. Mr. Sterling, last week I watched Jake, one of your best line cooks, choose between paying for his insulin or his rent. He chose the insulin. Maria in the kitchen has been bringing her 8-year-old to work on weekend because she can't afford childcare, and we've all been taking turns watching him. And Thomas, your manager, he works here 6 days a week and drives for a rideshare company every night just to make ends meet. Each revelation felt like a punch to Richard's gut. These weren't faceless statistics from some distant workplace. These were people he'd personally hired, people whose work ethic he'd admired without understanding the desperation driving it. Tomorrow morning, I'm calling an emergency meeting with my entire executive team, Richard said, standing up with newfound determination. We're going to restructure our entire compensation system, starting immediately. No one who works 40 hours a week should struggle to afford basic housing. Sophia's eyes widened. Mr. Sterling, I don't want to cause trouble for anyone. You're not causing trouble. You're solving it. Richard pulled out his phone, scrolling through his contacts. I'm calling my assistant right now to arrange temporary housing for you tonight. Corporate housing unit downtown. It's yours until we figure out something permanent. I can't accept that, Sophia protested, even as relief flooded her features. You're not accepting charity. You're accepting what should have been yours all along, dignity. Richard's voice carried 20 years of business authority, but also something warmer. And tomorrow, after I meet with my team, I'm going to ask you to help me understand what else I've been missing. I want you to be part of the solution. As he made the call to arrange immediate housing, Richard felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the satisfaction of doing something truly meaningful. The numbers on his financial statements had always given him a sense of accomplishment, but this, ensuring that someone who worked for him had a safe place to sleep, felt like success in a way that profit margins never could. Your daughter, he said after ending the call. Katie, I want to make sure our new policies include support for employee childcare. Would you be willing to share what would have helped you most over these past months? Sophia's composure finally broke, and she began to cry, not from shame this time, but from hope she'd been afraid to let herself feel. Mr. Sterling, I just wanted to work hard and take care of my daughter. I never expected. You never expected your employer to care about you as a person, Richard finished gently. That changes now. If you've been enjoying this story, subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales. As dawn began to filter through the storage room window, both Sophia and Richard realized they were witnessing the beginning of something unprecedented, a business transformation born from genuine human compassion. 6 months later, Richard stood in the same storage room, but everything had changed. The space had been converted into a comfortable break room for employees, complete with couches, a small kitchen, and a quiet corner for anyone who needed a moment away from the bustling restaurant. On the wall hung a framed photograph of the ribbon-cutting ceremony for Sterling Restaurant's new employee childcare center, with Sophia and 7-year-old Katie front and center, both beaming with joy. The transformation hadn't been easy. Richard had faced resistance from investors who questioned the financial wisdom of doubling base wages and providing comprehensive benefits. Some board members had worried about setting precedents that other businesses couldn't follow. But the results spoke louder than their concerns. Employee turnover had dropped to nearly zero, customer satisfaction scores had reached record highs, and productivity had increased beyond Richard's most optimistic projections. When people felt valued and secure, they brought their best selves to work. Sophia had been promoted to Director of Employee Wellness, a position Richard had created specifically for her. Her job was to ensure that no employee ever faced a choice between dignity and survival. She worked closely with local housing authorities, childcare providers, and financial counselors to create a support network that other businesses were now studying and implementing. "You know what I learned that night?" Richard said to Sophia as they stood together in the transformed room. "I learned that my grandmother's vision was right, but incomplete. She wanted to create a place where customers felt cared for. What you taught me, is that you can't truly care for customers if you don't first care for the people serving them." Sophia smiled, adjusting a photo on the bulletin board that showed Katie at her new school, no longer worried about having to change districts if her mother couldn't make rent. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you hadn't come back for those papers that night." "I think the universe's way of showing us what we need to see when we're ready to see it," Richard replied. "I've been so focused on building a successful business that I forgot businesses are made of people with real lives and real struggles." The evening shift was just beginning, and through the break room window, they could see the dining room filling with families celebrating anniversaries, friends catching up over dinner, and couples sharing quiet conversations over candlelight. But now Richard also saw the servers, cooks, and managers who made those moments possible, people who could afford to live with dignity because someone had finally listened to their struggles and chosen to act. "The best part," Sophia said, watching her colleagues begin their evening routines with confidence and security they'd never had before, "is knowing that Katie will grow up in a world where people like you exist. People who have the power to change things and actually use it." As Richard locked up that evening, he passed the spot where he'd once found Sophia sleeping among supply boxes. The memory would always remind him that true success wasn't measured in profit margins or expansion plans, but in the simple act of ensuring that everyone who contributed to that success could live with dignity and hope. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more heartwarming tales. Thank you for joining us on this journey of compassion and transformation.